All right, Doug, good morning. We're back with questions from members of the Phyle. The Phyle is a private community associated with Crisis Investing, our newsletter. If you're interested in subscribing and asking questions and also getting investment recommendations from Doug, go to crisisinvesting.com. So, Doug, first question. What was your vision for Estancia de Cafayate? And what have you taken away from it, good, bad, and interesting?
Well, look, I thought for years before we did it that it would be nice to have a place where you had everything you wanted and you could hang out with like-minded people. In other words, you wouldn't have to deal with annoying neighbors and annoying local government officials, and you'd have everything that you wanted that was close at hand and blah, blah, blah. So it seemed like a good idea at the time, uh, which is whatever you have to say that, it means that something went wrong. And um, would I do it again? Well, I don't have to do it again. Somebody else will get a bee in the bonnet and try to do it again. Like, look, there are a number of free cities movements around the world today where people are setting up enclaves that are similar in many respects. So I don't need to do it and have all the brain damage and financial risk and financial loss, although I kind of suspect I'll break even on the damn thing eventually. So nice idea. And it's worked out better than most of them. Like there's another guy that I know who tried to do something similar, not with any ideological underpinnings, but he wanted to do a golf and tennis place and a wine, golf, tennis, and wine, I guess. And he picked the wrong area in Argentina. It's near Mendoza, nice area, but there's no towns near there. So it's kind of the middle of nowhere. And there's nothing really to draw the. Look, it's a tough game. If I was going to do it again, which I'm not, I would probably not do the golf course because I don't play golf. I'm not old enough to play golf. I'm in that range where I'm too old to play polo, but not quite old enough to play golf. So I definitely dropped the golf course part of it. But and I'd probably do something more on the order of what we were talking about the other day with Joel Salatin, where it would be kind of a kind of a kind of
A working agrarian kind of
work.
place.
Yeah, exactly. Which
Produce
would
all
be
your own healthy food.
visually pleasing, economically sustainable, convenient from other points of view. Yeah. I mean, I think that would be the proper way to do it, in addition to tennis courts and bocce ball courts and things like that, which are low cost, relatively speaking. But forget about the golf course part.
Was there anything else good, bad, or interesting that you've taken away from the experience?
Well, we were fortunate in a way to have the governor of the province as a partner, and he certainly smoothed the way because if the local political powers that be don't like you for one reason or another, they'll make your life miserable. So our partner, the governor, did make things a lot easier for us. So
Yeah.
that's a good thing to take away. In the world that we live in, you've got to have good political connections, I think. And you've got to be adequately capitalized. And of course, no matter how much capital you raise, there are things that go wrong and you always need more. Um, so, it's why bother doing it is what I'm saying. I mean, really, it's a lot of
Yeah.
brain damage. It's a huge amount of financial risk. So many things can go wrong that can be a cause for embarrassment. You're dealing with the public, where even if they're a libertarian-oriented part of the public, they're going to have all kinds of psychological problems that you have to deal with. So no, I think the best thing to do, if you like the idea of living in a development like that, is find someone that has already done it and rent before you buy and see how you like it.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, every experience that you walk away from where you're not bankrupt or maimed turns out to be kind of a good experience,
Yeah.
better than not having any experience at all. But
But
I
this
don't
is a big
recommend.
one. It takes 2 decades to see how it works out even, right? I mean,
Yeah, exactly. And there's too many other things to do in life. So if you're thinking about it, I'd say think twice or maybe think 3 times.
right. Yeah, I think one of the things is just because you're offering a home to people, and if people are picky about anything, they're really picky about their home. They're really picky about their street and their neighbors and what other their neighbors do. And even if you bring a bunch of people together of good faith, this is where these little preferences really flare up.
Yeah, and everybody, at least in the US, is used to the idea, well, if I buy real estate or I buy a house, I'm going to make money. But that's a ridiculous thought because houses are consumer goods. And as a developer, really the only way you can be assured of making money is if there is a bull market in that kind of real estate. And there's no guarantee of that for sure. So
Yeah.
I guess in answer to the question, what have I taken away from it? I'd say basically forget about it. And there are other ways to solve the problem.
I love it. Okay. Next question. In the rare instances in life where your personal philosophy, morals, and business ethics aren't in complete alignment, what do you do? He says, this is his short example here. He says, in his 50 years on Earth, I can count on one hand the times this has happened to me, but without going into a long dissertation, this is the simple overview. I recently had an incident with a real estate transaction where I can see and understand both sides of the issue, both buyer and seller, and feel both sides have valid arguments. The seller's argument aligns more with my philosophical beliefs because by supporting the buyer in this particular scenario, it gives more power to the government. However, by supporting the seller and my philosophical beliefs, future issues could arise for the buyer going against my business ethics. At the moment, it seems that at the end of the day, somebody gets screwed, and possibly two of the three parties, and I'm one of those parties, will come out on the short end of the stick. So how do you handle these problems you encounter where you have maybe personal philosophy and ethics run into each other?
Well, one thing that I've learned that will forestall and head off a lot of these problems is good people make for good business and bad people make for bad business. So stay away from people that you suspect have the wrong kind of ethical underpinnings. That'll automatically head off and solve a lot of the problems. And it's a mistake that we all make where you don't listen. Maybe you read the person wrong. You thought he was good, but he's not. So anyway, keep an eye out for that. That's number one. And a lot of people that I know that are very successful try not to work with partners so that they're in control of things. And another thing to keep in mind is if you do work with partners, it's better if one person has 51% of the deal so we can make the decisions. That way, you're not going to reach loggerheads where you're squabbling and nobody can make the decision because you're equal partners and nobody's got the legal right to make a decision. So that's another thought is
Yeah.
if you're going to do it, you ought to control it really. Otherwise, you're just a minority shareholder and you're along for the ride and good luck. And sometimes you
Right.
have good luck, of course, but uh, and generally speaking, I think That's why I didn't. Well, when people ask me, what do I do for a living? And I tell them, well, I'm basically a speculator. And why do I say that? Because dealing with the public is risky and it's a pain in the ass. And I prefer not to deal with the public. Like you have a retail store, somebody buys something and they take it back, and there's all kinds of things that go wrong. So I'd rather just deal with the impersonal markets when possible. So I don't know if
Makes
that's an
sense.
answer to the question. It's a cosmic question because, people are, have all these aberrations and problems and so forth. So uh, maybe the answer is that we're on a prison planet. And if we're able to talk about the things like this, maybe we're just trustees. I mean, we're not down in the hole, or we're not in Gen Pop. We're like trustees. So, but we get to even address these issues. Puts us way ahead of the game. But we're still on a prison planet. So what are you going to do? Problems.
Yeah, I think, when you're dealing with, seems like the position he's in, where he's dealing with two parties and trying to put them together and he profits from the transaction happening, in that kind of scenario, and you have disagreements about how stuff's being handled. I think the only thing you really do is just be clear about what you think about the scenario, be totally honest about what you think is right and what you think how things should be handled. And then it's up to them. They do it. But your hands are clean if you've fully voiced your concerns in the matter, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's important. It's to have clean hands in the thing. I was listening to a conversation that Alan Dershowitz was having with some British interviewers the other day. It was most interesting. I mean, listening to Dershowitz for an hour. And he's been involved in all kinds of things that I didn't even realize before. And it seemed like he has a completely clear conscience where he knows why he did things. His reasons were good and ethical. And he emphasized the fact that, especially when he was uh, involved with Jeffrey Epstein, and he visited Lolita Island when it was brand new before, it was developed and so forth. But, it was clear to me that he had a clear conscience and clean hands because he'd never done anything that he felt was unethical. And he was able to explain these things. I think that's a critical element that sometimes it takes us all a while to learn, frankly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, whether he is his conscience should really be clean or not, I don't know. But some of his stuff is questionable, stuff in his life, I think. But the important thing is for you as an individual, you should always do things so that you have a clear conscience about what you've done. Like that's the important thing.
That's right. Even if you're wrong and you make a mistake, as long as you have a clear conscious about it, that's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, let's see. Next question. Doug, what do you think about countries measuring their growth using GDP, aka consumption? Might there be a better method for quantifying an advancing economy than GDP?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, GDP is not just flawed, it's a horrible measure of economic progress. I suppose if you're going to measure, I mean, you got to have numbers, measure it by some, but look, what does GDP include? It includes consumption. Well, just as the question uh, says, but consumption, it'd be better to measure by production, not consumption. And then people say, well, you can't have consumption without production. Well, that's not true. If you borrow a lot of money, for instance, you can consume a lot from past consumption or consumption from outside. So consumption is not a good metric because it It includes borrowing money and inflated money that encourages consumption. So no, forget about consumption. And GDP includes government work, and all government work is consumption, quite frankly. I mean, there's very little government stuff that's production. Well, yes, they hire contractors to do stuff for them. Yes, that's true, but when you've got millions of government employees, I mean, their salaries go down as part of GDP, presumably consumption, but they're not. They're the opposite of production. So what's the best way to determine progress for a country statistically with numbers? I'm not sure. What do you think?
Well, what's the difference between GDP and GNP, gross national product? Is that production?
Well, I don't know what the exact distinction in those two numbers is. There must be a distinction, but frankly, not being a government statistic wonk, because I think they're unreliable to start with. I'm not sure the difference between GNP and GDP is.
Yeah, I mean, I think two things
Perhaps.
that you would assume production would be a good measure, though, what you're producing, because that would seem to be more connected to the general benefit of the state or the nation state, the people in the state, or productivity, maybe something around productivity. It might relate to standard of living. I don't know.
It's a legitimate subject for inquiry, but as far as I'm concerned, the two things I brought up, the amount of debt in a society, which often relates consumer debt as opposed to industrial debt, distorts things, and the figures that of people that work for or with the government further distort things. So interesting numbers. This is what economists should do, but I'm not sure they do. Today's economists don't describe the way the world does work. They prescribe the way they think it ought to work. That's what most economists today do and are hired for. Most of them are a waste of time.
Which is why their
So,
models are so effective, and they can say, that what do they say that about the transitory inflation, for instance, recently? They said it was just transitory. It was just here for a blip, right?
well, I suppose everything's transitory when you
In the
look
long
at it from that point of view.
run. Yeah, in the long run. Okay, so the next question has to do with this painting that's behind you in Buenos Aires. So I'm going to just pull up this picture because you're not there today, but here.
No, I'm back on the farm in Uruguay. I'm very happy about that. Okay.
So the question
Yeah,
is,
where did I
tell
get
us about
that?
this.
Well, I can't tell you too much about it, except that I was going through a commercial art gallery in not far from the Recoleta area where I live in Buenos Aires, where there are a lot of art galleries, which I like to do. I like to visit art galleries everywhere when I go to places, and I liked it. And what it is, you can't see too well, I guess. It's a globe standing for planet Earth, and it's got buildings and a lot of weaponry, a bit of implied violence, and that rose is kind of growing out of the ruins on planet Earth. And I thought that's a very good image, and it's a technically well done painting. So, and who's the artist? He's an Argentine, but I can't remember his name. I presume he signed it on the back of the painting. I could find out somehow, but it's not important to me. Listen, I buy art because it has a meaning. to me. And that picture had a meaning to me. Planet Earth, disaster, weapons, kind of darkness, but a rose growing out of the chaos. That's
As the
basically what
eternal optimist you are.
eternal optimist I am, exactly. And generally speaking, I mean, I bought a lot of art over the years, I have a lot of art everywhere. And I like art that is, first of all, has technical excellence, where, I mean, a lot of art that's peddled today, it looks like a chimpanzee or a young kid could have done it with finger paints, and they got hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars for it. That's a scam. So it's got to be technically excellent, it's got to be thoughtful, and it's got to tell me something about the way the artist thinks the world works and what the world means. Okay. And generally speaking, I like large pieces of art. In other words, not tiny little things that are okay, but I like big things. Like here in Uruguay, I've got a lot of wall space, and I've got one painting done by a Bulgarian artist who I've met personally in Bulgaria, and it's about, let me see, well, we can walk in the next room and look at it actually, but it's of classical, Greek classical themes, and it's about 6 feet high and 10 feet wide. That's a big
Yeah.
picture. And it covers the whole wall in the dining room, but I like it because I like classical themes with horses and goddesses and things of that nature.
Yeah, you've got a lot of great art. So basically you like the art that is the opposite of the banana duct taped to the wall.
Yeah, that's actually not art at all. It's a degraded scam that's promoted to stupid people with too much money. I mean, really, most modern art today and all so-called postmodern art, which is a whole way of thinking about literature and here's one of my dogs. If anybody brings up, I don't know if you can
Yeah, you can
see
see it, right?
lovey-dovey here or if not. This is to introduce her because Jeff Berwick, of course, became famous, or Lucy became famous because of Jeff. So I've got dogs too, and this is Lovey Dovey. She's a Ukrainian bar girl, you may recall. And so when there are questions about what's going on in that part of the world, I can ask her and her sister, who isn't as bold as she is. She's a Russian nurse, and the two of them have differing opinions on different subjects. Okay, lovey-dovey. Thanks. It's good to see you.
All right, great. So next question. It says something that is holding me back from exploring down with you guys. I assume he assumes the Southern Cone here. What are Doug's thoughts on caring for elderly parents? And specifically, what are his thoughts on balancing between leaving the US and finding a plan B and or caring for them in a phase of life when they need assistance?
I think you're much, much better off out of North America, or for that matter, out of Europe, to solve that problem. Because in these less developed countries, or countries that are actually quite developed, but have segments of the population that aren't as economically advanced, I mean, you can hire staff for very reasonable numbers, very affordable numbers, even for a middle-class American. And that's the way to solve that particular problem. Because if you've got elderly parents that need care, well, what do you do with them? I mean, in the past, in the US, we used to take care of them in our houses, but most houses aren't structured for that type of thing anymore. And you can't get help easily, and it's expensive, and there's all kinds of problems. So there's a lot to be said for living in the third world. And I would put my finger on Latin America and a number of countries, or the Orient, which is very well suited for solving that problem as well.
Now, the other thing is what we discussed last time we talked about the healthcare differences. We were specifically talking about between China and the US for one particular procedure, but you can get health insurance from a private hospital in Uruguay or in Argentina, great hospitals with great care for a rounding error of what you'd pay in the US.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, you don't have to get the insurance at all, so you don't have to deal with a third party. I mean, you talk directly with the healthcare provider, and because you get insurance, you're going to pay for it one way or another. So you can avoid the whole problem, I think.
Yeah, but it's so much
You know,
less
The
expensive.
US
And I
system
think,
is so corrupt right now. It's just unconscionably expensive for no good reason,
right.
except
And then ultimately you end up having to put, depending upon how long your parents live and how their, course of life goes, ultimately a lot of people end up in a home. And and then you're basically burning through whatever savings they have, spending ten or $20,000 a month for them to be in a facility where, the people that work there are, I mean, it's questionable what you're going to end up with, the kind of care they're actually going to get when they're there. And so I don't know. I mean, if that under that scenario, honestly, as long as you could get the parents on board with it, it's better to be in a place like this. I mean,
yeah,
much greater ability to take care of them here than there.
yeah, completely. I mean, all advantages and no real disadvantages that I can think of.
No, I don't think so either. Okay, second question from him is I'm still looking for Bricks ag stocks. We'd love to hear Doug's thoughts. He said he recently bought LND. I don't even know what that is, honestly, on the US exchange, but was thinking he could do better. Do you have any thoughts on Bricks ag?
Yeah, we can look up, I guess, that symbol and see what it is and where it is. Um, I mean, there was one ag stock that was to do with black earth type farming in the Ukraine. I'm not sure that that worked out well, or maybe it's a super bargain right now. I'm not have to look into it. It could be a great anomaly. Um, the only one I can think of right now is here in Argentina. There's a company called Cresud, which has been around for a long time. I don't know what its current dividend yield is. I'm going to guess it's around 6 or 7%. And with and it grows stuff like soybeans and wheat and those kind of crops. It probably has a cattle operation too. And soybean and wheat are really very, very cheap right now. And Argentina is on its way up and getting better. So, when Milei gets rid of the export duties and all kinds of other stuff here, uh, I think that particular stock could really do well.
Hmm.
I don't know if I'm right about its current dividend yield. I don't own it, but I think I should. And I'm going to start building a position in it.
This LND is Brazil Agro, and it's according to Seeking Alpha, it's a 13% yield right now.
Wow, that's worth looking into.
Yeah, sure is.
Yeah, I don't
Sure
know
is.
what
And
what they do, but that's interesting. Yeah, what does Cresud does it say have for yield?
do you happen to know what the ticker is?
Uh, I don't.
Do you know how to spell it?
Cresud.
Okay. It's paying a 6.7% yield right now.
Pretty reasonable considering ag products, soy and wheat and corn are very cheap now, actually.
And it's up 80% in the last year.
Wow.
That's
And
the
I
Malay
suspect,
factor.
and I suspect it's going higher.
Yeah, and I just saw something about just the effect, and you can crap on people do crap on Malay all the time. But here's some things that have happened there. that were announced today is that Argentina had the highest oil production in the last 19 years and the highest gas production in the last 15 years. All they're doing is getting the government out of the way and immediately becomes more productive.
Yeah, and their gas reserves in Patagonia, in a province called Neuquén, which is where San Martin de los Andes, which is a fantastic little town. I mean, it was the first place in Argentina that we actually bought something. Yeah, it's said to be the size of the Permian Basin in the Southwest U.S. So Argentina could become a major oil and gas exporter in the years to come.
And one other thing that's interesting is that that's happened also in the first quarter of this year, I guess it is that Banco Nación has already lent the private sector 373% more than it did in 2023. Why? There's more money to be lent to the private sector because the government isn't taking it.
Yeah. Yeah, things are going to get better and better here in Argentina. And finally, property prices, which are still very cheap, and it's very illiquid. So, you know, if you're looking to get a crib someplace outside of the US or Canada, which you should, now is an absolutely perfect time to buy. Can anything go wrong? Yeah, of course. But, you know, I think it's a really good bet.
Yeah.
I
Okay, next question.
I thought it was a good bet before Milei was elected, as you know.
Yeah, exactly. And and eventually it will be. That's right. So let's see. Is Doug familiar with gray man hide in plain sight strategies? And if so, how well do you think they would work for finance and property in a large country like the US when things go seriously downhill?
I'm familiar with an outfit called it's called Gray Strategies, and they're basically military contractors that look at trouble spots in the world and analyze it. I don't know how I can look it up, but
I'll look it
what
up.
was? But no, not
You never heard
Gray.
of like gray man? Have you ever heard of that?
That doesn't. But there is something Gray something that sounds like it's similar to that. That I get their blog. But
Oh,
it sounds like the answer is what do you do if to maintain a low profile when things are going wrong in your country? And yeah, I guess it makes sense not to be, as the Kiwis say, don't be a tall poppy, because the tall poppy is the one that gets lopped off. Yeah, but it's no fun having to keep your head down and be a non-tall poppy after all. What kind of a place is that to live?
yeah. And it's really, I mean, the whole idea of the gray man is the idea of that you're hiding in plain sight, so but you're blending into such a degree that you can go unnoticed. It's hard to see.
I got a better idea. Go someplace where you don't have to do that. That that's a thought.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Okay. I'm curious if Doug, if you have any particular ideas as to what the file may someday become, so file members may choose to focus on developing your ideas further for the group, if they're interested. And he says, thank you both for your leadership and inspiration with it.
Well, I'm not big on leadership personally, but the idea is that look, what Neil Stephenson was talking about in Diamond Age is that the idea of countries and nation states is really a pretty stupid way to organize, for people to organize. They should instead seek out other people that they share whatever's important to them with. For some people, that's religion. For some people, it may be stamp collecting. But that's who you want to associate with, and those are who your buds and your countrymen really are. So I guess that members of our file share it's not a subscription newsletter service, not at all,
Yeah.
because people have subscribed to all kinds of newsletters, or all kinds of people that come in from the highways and the byways, and I don't know how much they have in common. But people that are members of our file are libertarian oriented and more or less see the world in the same way. So how will it evolve? Well, we'll have to see. But I hope it does evolve along those lines, and I think it will.
Yeah, as of now, we got, I don't know, 650 or 700 members that are in there. And yeah, I mean, the goal is just to have a place where people of similar view of the world and similar view of the world, similar affinity, essentially can come together, because especially during the era of COVID, most sane people thought they were alone in their sanity, and that maybe even made them feel like they were the insane person as they witnessed what was happening around them. And I think that continuing today, even though we don't have something as stark as the COVID hysteria happening around us. But there's a lot of good that's come out of it. I mean, with the last meetup we had here in Uruguay, we had 35 people there who have relocated to Uruguay. Families, kids. It's beautiful. Lots of people have gotten together themselves, and they're organized and met up. And the whole idea is if you're around people you like, there's all kinds of productive things you can do together. Whether it's just companionship's nice, but way beyond that, way beyond that. So it's a self-directed thing fundamentally, but I encourage people, if there's something you're interested in, to communicate that within the group and just share what you're working on, and you'll get support from others around you.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's kind of a initial filtering mechanism, so that that there are people that more or less think the way you do about the way the world works and what's right and what's wrong and things like that.
Yep. Yeah, we initially tried this. I was trying on Telegram to, to connect people that way at first. And it just became a disaster because there were so many trolls and just bad faith actors in there. And so when we launched Phyle, then it made it so that low bar of entry like filters out 99% of the bad actors. I've had in total in 3 years, I've kicked out 3 people who were who were bad actors who got into the group somehow. Everyone else has been fantastic. I mean, our VIP calls we have every single week, this group of guys in that call it's been a real pleasure for me. And I think for a lot of them to get to know each other over the last couple of years through these calls. And so there's a lot of good stuff that comes of it, at least for me.
Yeah, I agree with you. So purpose of the file is to act as an initial filter for people and put the people that are there together. They can, or if they don't want to, don't have to, or just listen in or whatever. It's very gemütlich, I think.
Yeah. I love it. I think it's been great. Okay, so let's see. Next, he says, fun question for you and Doug. With AI-backed robots on the horizon, Musk states that robots will do most or all of the work we now do. He suggests that UBI will be necessary going forward because of this. Some prognosticators have said that humans can stay home and do creative work like paint, poetry, music, etc. Even though AI will do these better, I suggest that most people will sit and play video games or whatever and be unproductive. But the question is, will some of us have more than others eventually by renting out their robot, still having socioeconomic strata? He said, I believe there will ultimately be rich and poor over time, even in this environment, even though we all start off as equal.
Yeah, of course, there's always going to be people that are rich and people that are poor, simply because if you have some financial assets, some gold or some money or whatever it is, real estate, those things will all still be owned by warm human beings. And, some people are going to piss it all away and consume it, and others are going to try to use it productively. So yeah, you're always going to have rich people. And the robots are not going to have Well, maybe it's so hard to say at this point when quantum computers are put within robots, and it's very hard to predict the way this will all evolve. But what's really the question here? I mean, we've already got Terminator style robots on the way. This is clear. You've seen the bipedal robots that can walk and do acrobatic maneuvers and jump and lift, and you know, and so as artificial intelligence and computers get better, they'll start thinking for it's the Terminator's only a few years away. And those are the bipedal terminators, and you got quadrupedal terminators, and
The drones.
yeah, this is happening right before our very eyes. There's no question about it. It's here now. I mean,
The
not
interesting thing,
widespread.
right? And there's this destructive side, obviously, the Terminator side, which is concerning. And then you look at the productive power of this automation, these technologies. I sent you a video. I don't know if you watched it, but it's a promotional video for BYD and their fully robotic plant for producing one of their cars. And it's super impressive.
Super impressive. And it's hard to say, but it doesn't look like there's even room for uh, a carbon-based life form to do anything there. It's all totally robotic, the creation of these BYD cars.
And you can see though, like how that would, if you do that, if you use robots on that productive capacity, how the wealth could skyrocket. Like don't use these things for machines of war, but if you use them for productive machines, it really does create a scenario where the standard of living, because productivity increases, is what causes an improvement in standard of living. It could really be amazing for people.
Yeah, and of course, I guess Elon Musk's question, which is really, uh, he's a genius that I've got so much respect for in so many different ways, but he doesn't have a good grip on economics. This idea of having a guaranteed annual income, I think that's what he was referring to, because you're going to have these people that aren't going to work. No, it's insane to have a guaranteed annual income, because that capital is going to have to come from someplace, and the government is the entity that's going to allocate it. And then you're going to lead to all the problems that you have with, well, the way the U.S. government's absolutely destroyed Black people by putting them in vertical ghettos and giving them free money and all this type of thing. The same thing will happen across the whole civilization. If you have a guaranteed annual income, it won't be just Black people that get screwed up. It'll be everybody that gets
Right.
screwed up. So
And,
no,
and
it's an insane idea. And people will have capital, people will do things, some will get rich, you don't need or you don't want a guaranteed annual income.
right. And I
It
think
feeds
that the thing
power to
is,
the wrong people.
it does be, it's because when you talk about the Black community in the US is a great example, because not only, they gave them money, but they gave them money with strings attached that were designed for social engineering, which destroyed the Black community. And so just with all these with CBDCs, with being able to understand exactly what people are spending on, carbon footprints and all that nonsense, it would all be tied to this social engineering nonsense that'll drive people into poverty one way or another, or to disastrous cultural outcomes, if nothing else.
Yes, and somebody's going to have to make the determinants of how much money and who gets it. So it's going to be the elite class that like the idea of controlling everybody else with their guaranteed annual. It's a stupid. In fact, it's worse than stupid. It's a criminal idea, and I'm surprised that, well, Musk probably hasn't thought about this very much, or I think he wouldn't come to that conclusion.
And I mean, even the idea that, people were concerned, oh no, if you have all of these, farm equipment, what are all the people going to do? They're not going to be able to do anything. If we take farm hands off the land working and replace them with machines, but that they can find more productive things to do. Things move up the value chain of services and goods that humans want. And that will still be the case with this.
Yeah, this has been going on for hundreds of years, since the Industrial Revolution, actually. I mean, it used to be that 90% or at least 80% of people lived on the farm, and then they all started moving into the cities. What are they going to do when they move it? Don't worry, they found something to do. And that's not going to continue, even with robots, which are absolutely wonderful things.
Yep, I totally agree. Totally agree. Okay. Next question says, thanks to you and Doug, my son is considering a trade versus an engineering degree. I have had him assist me, then eventually show him how to work on the car, replace light switches, installing ceiling fans, work on plumbing and some carpentry. Overall, I love when he does not win. That is when he learns the most. He says he's subscribed to the Great Man podcast. It's my son's thing, and he reads all the updates there. So his questions are, when will there be more information concerning the preparation? And in the meantime, which is this book that we're working on, says, in the meantime, I've introduced my son to as many hands-on tasks as possible. His questions are always met with another question from me. That's the first question.
Okay, well, it's a good question. And I've got to compliment your son, Max, for his Great Man podcast. It's greatman.com, right?
Right. Yep.
And it's actually just fantastic. It's short and pithy and full of information on what he's doing. And I mean, everybody ought to subscribe to it because it'll get you thinking for what you, if you're that age, or your son or grandson should be doing instead of idiotically going to college and having your mind polluted and corrupted for 4 years at huge expense, which will be an albatross around your neck for many years. So what Max is doing and describing in greatman.com is fantastic. And actually, this was an idea of mine, as you know, that, you guys thought it was a good idea and jumped on it. And so I guess we're writing a book that's going to explain in a lot of detail exactly what Max is doing and how and what the resources are and blah, 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 and what you shouldn't do and so forth. So maybe we'll have that book finished in the next month or so. I can't believe it, but I think we probably will. And then we'll peddle it and see if people like it. But there's no money in books, but it's really good karma to get this stuff out there, I think. In the meantime, everybody ought to just go to greatman.com because you're on a computer right now and subscribe to the podcast. It's really entertaining.
Yeah, I think, and I think that whether there's money in the book or not, there was some urgency to do something around this because Max was just turned 18 and he's, as bad as the world is and no matter whether it gets better or worse, he's got to become an adult. He's got to find his way and do his own thing. And he didn't want to go the conventional route. So I was trying to help formulate that for him. So we've had a working guinea pig in him. And, so we have some very practical stuff in this book and also a lot of the philosophical framework that is not taught to young men at all, which I think leaves them totally rudderless. It's the skills are part of it, but if you can't understand the world well and how you can succeed in it, then you're screwed.
Yeah, and sometimes, you're right. It's not just being rudderless, it's being actively misguided so that you wind up hitting the rocks. I mean, it's worse than being rudderless. So, yeah, it's going to be, I think it'll turn out to be a pretty worthwhile thing. So, and the thing is that Max is figuring out a lot of this stuff for himself, but it's really helpful to have some guidance of people that have been around for a few decades and can help direct and keep you from making serious mistakes. No wasting time.
Yeah, well, and Max is getting a lot of that guidance. He's getting a lot more hands-on between the two of us. So, yeah. So the next question was, when will The Assassin be released?
Well, it has been, as you probably or maybe you don't know because we're not that good on promoting it. The 3 novels that John Hunt and I have done so far are Speculator, Drug Lord, and Assassin in which our hero, Charles Knight, advances from one occupation to another and shows how you do these occupations and how you can be a good guy doing it, including being an assassin and a drug lord. And next is terrorist, where he's accused of being a terrorist. And I'm looking forward to that. John is basically writing the book. He's very good at this, multi-talented medical doctor. But I've got a lot of views on terrorism as a method of warfare. So I think that's going to be quite good. And John says that he's close to completing it. So yeah,
Wow.
yeah, that's what
Wow.
he says. And then of course I'm the weak link because then I gotta do certain things with it. But I think it'll be really good when Terrorist is out.
Oh, I
Maybe
think so
that'll.
too. And your timing couldn't be better. I feel like we're going to see a spate of terrorism in the
I got a
world.
feeling we will. And the problem with writing a series of science fiction books is that reality is outracing the books. It's really kind of annoying.
Yeah, I know. Some of your science fiction heroes were like, 50, 100 years ahead. Doug, you're like 12 months ahead.
I'm barely trying to keep up.
I know. It's amazing. Okay, so The Assassin is out. You can get it on Amazon. Go find it there. Terrorist is the next one, and apparently it's in the hopper. So have that soon. All
Approaching.
right.
We'll certainly announce it when it's out.
Oh yeah, you'll know. You'll know. Okay, so how does Doug see demographics affecting economies and civilization? I mean, there's a lot of talk about lots of nations being in demographic decline. I think Japan and Korea, South Korea being two of the most famous examples of that. But also in China, we start to see that turn recently. How does that affect the economy and civilization?
It seems like almost everywhere in the world is in demographic decline. Um, and it's completely, I think, predictable and understandable. People move into the cities. Um, they still have kids, but in the cities, kids are kind of a liability and an expense, where if you're down on the farm, they're helpful, cheap labor. So that's one thing. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. And there are other reasons why that's going to continue. So the only place this isn't happening is in really backward, primitive parts of the world. And what that means is Africa today. Because even in Brazil, which is kind of backward, I mean, the reproduction rate is it's less than 2.0. And
Oh,
in Iran, a Muslim country, I understand it's about 1.6. And this is everywhere. It's not just really outstanding examples like South Korea and Japan and now China. So
is it necessarily bad? Is it necessarily bad I don't like, a natural population decline, but is it necessarily the negative? I know it's bad for GDP, but is it necessarily negative?
no, I don't think it's necessarily negative. I mean, how many people do you really need in order to make a market? And of course, this is a dangerous thing to say today because these morons that show up at the WEF, I mean, all of them, starting with Ted Turner and all of these elite types, they all want to reduce the world's population. They picked an arbitrary number. I understand, 500 million. And, they want to get there as soon as possible. Well, that's kind of arbitrary and kind of ridiculous, actually,
It sounds a bit evil.
and evil. Yeah, exactly. I mean, they really just want to have themselves, the elite, and just enough plebs out there to, you know, provide the necessary goods and services because they ain't going to work. They're going to boss the plebs around. And there's no room for the middle class, frankly. They're a problem. You just need the elite and the plebs that do what they're told, and you don't need the middle class that are actually productive. So I don't know what the ideal number of people on planet Earth is. I mean, I mean, for all I know, it could be not just 8 billion that we got now, it could be 40 billion. It could be 80 billion, as unbelievable as that sounds. And would there be enough resources? Well, it just depends on how clever scientists and engineers are. And they've been plenty clever so far. The world population's gone up by approximately 10 times, not quite, since the Industrial Revolution. And there's much, much more wealth and much, much less starvation than there was with 1/10 the number of people. So in theory, there's no problem.
Is
But
the problem going the other way though? I mean, when people talking about China's, demographic cliff, they say that basically they like people like Peter the Stooge Zihan will like write off China because he'll say, well, demographics have peaked, so like they're goners. But let's say if their population reduces and let's say it goes down to 800 million over the
yeah,
next 40 years.
it's amazing. You've got these people that are very glib and are being, promoted by the powers of darkness. Like who's that horrible little faggot, Noble Hoovel Harari? Same thing. He's the court intellectual of the WEF. They all basically say the same kind of thing. They're all subsidized by kind of the same powers that be that see themselves as the elite and that. I don't know which way, I don't know what's actually going to happen. I mean, who's going to win, frankly?
I don't know. It's gonna be a toss up.
I mean, the only place the population is increasing is Africa. But Africa, it's going to go the same way as the rest of the world as people move into cities. So that's going to happen. But I don't even know if it'll get that far because when the West stops sending, free money and technology to Africa, I mean, its population could collapse. Collapse in an unpleasant way, not just collapse because of non-reproduction like in the West. A lot of unpredictable things going on at this moment in history.
Yeah, I guess my question though is it necessarily is it necessarily bad for the people, just take China's example, just because we know they're in a decline. If you're is it are the Chinese folks who are there 40 years from now, once the population has declined, organically to let's say some real low number like 800 million, is it necessarily devastating for them? I mean, is it really bad for those people? Because people make it seem like it's a horrible thing, but I wonder, if the population naturally declines, does it mean that their standard of living falls away? Does it mean that that their life is bad? I don't know.
No, I think the standard of living has to do with what's in the heads of the people that remain. And, China during the days of Mao, for instance, only had 600 million people. So they've had their own population explosion over the last, 50, 60 years. And
Mm.
all right, so it ebbs and flows. I don't see a problem. I mean, really, you can argue more people are better because, if you have more millions, you're gonna have more people like Elon Musk that are 1 out of a million that make things better for everybody.
Yeah, or just human ingenuity and creativity, kind of pursuing benefiting themselves and along the way create value for others. And if it's a free market, that's a good thing. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I'm pro people. I want more people, but I just think these people that talk about it, the population decline as like an end of civilization kind of idea. I don't know why that would necessarily be the case.
No, I don't either. It's like too many people's a problem, too few people are a problem. Forget about it. These are non-problems. They'll take care of themselves. Don't worry about it. I mean, uh, pay more attention to what's happening in your own backyard opposed to what they say is happening on TV elsewhere in places
Yeah.
that nobody's ever been to start with.
Yeah, I think that's good advice. Okay, just two more questions for you, Doug. One person shared this. He says this little thing from Mexico City, and he says Mexico is currently under 4 straight days of bans on driving due to pollution levels. He says it switches day to day from odd plates to even plates, except for EVs and hybrids. What's your take on governments doing these bans to make the transition to EVs?
Oh, they're stupid, and they really don't help. First of all, if you're a rich person, which you should be, you'll probably have two cars, one with an even plate and one with an odd plate. So you're mildly inconvenienced at best. And maybe you're kind of happy about it because most people that
Less
don't are
traffic.
going to stay off the road. So it's better for you, you know. We used to have this in the US. Most people have forgotten. During the artificial gas crises during the 70s, they did this where you could only drive same basis, odd, even, because there wasn't enough gas.
Hmm.
And that was totally caused by government intervention as well. So I don't know. These people in the government just have to be able to say they're doing something.
Right. And all of their solutions to the problems, real or imagined problems, create more problems, right?
Yeah, exactly. You can imagine all the problems that are being created, especially with the poor people that don't have two cars where they can obviate this. They can't get to work, and it's really stupid.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Last question here. He says every time he comments this on YouTube, it gets deleted every time he asks it. So he says, so this is probably the future of events to censor. He says, will there be a war in South America? He says he thinks that there could be, Argentina versus Brazil as a kind of a proxy continuation of the NATO versus BRICS, but in the Southern Hemisphere. And he says because Malay wants Argentina to join NATO. So what do you think about that?
Well, yeah, it does make me wonder about Milei that he wants Argentina to join NATO, which is about the most stupid idea that anybody could come up with. I mean, talk about asking for trouble for absolutely nothing to be gained. I mean, that makes so who knows why Milei said that? Maybe he's just trying to show that he's a pro-Western good guy as opposed to, one of these typical South American dictators. I have no idea. But is there going to be war within? Yeah, look, there have been famous stupid wars down here. 100 years ago, the Paraguayans and the Brazilians and the Argentines and the Bolivians too had a battle that basically killed 90% of the men in Paraguay. Will that happen again? I don't think so. Are the Argentines ever going to fight the Brazilians? I can't see why, frankly. I mean, Uruguay is right in between the two of them anyway. And the Uruguayans don't have an army or a navy. In fact, the Argentines don't have an army or a navy at this point to speak of. They really don't. I mean, they actually don't exist. Well, they exist, but not really. Now, none of this makes any sense. I mean, sure, you had Honduras and was it El Salvador that fought the football war in Central America because of a soccer game. I mean, this is what happens when you have these. There are other examples. I mean, like who was it? Was it Peru and Ecuador had a border war over? I can't remember what the hell the border war was about between them, and the Bolivians want an access to the sea, which Chile took away from them. All this kind of stuff goes on. But is there actually going to be actual wars in South America? It's really pretty hard for me to feature. Anything can happen with these crazy chimpanzees who populate this planet, but I wouldn't worry too much about serious wars in South America or South America getting involved in other wars. I just
It does seem like borders are the basis of war, right? And so it is a big advantage, I think, to both Brazil and Argentina that they've got this buffer state. Just makes it so, and nobody cares about Uruguay. It's a non-factor in their in their political or economic calculus.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time featuring what would be the casus belli of a war between almost any of these countries, except a psychotic break on the part of the guy that's that's running it. But
Just not the rally the people behind a just cause of some kind, something that was you were injustice, that something you were deprived of, you have to have some cause to rally people around of some kind. And a border gives you that, I
yeah,
guess.
yeah, but I just don't see it, right? Civil war is possible in these countries like Brazil. Should be at least two different countries. I mean, there's sociologically and demographically and geographically, it's so different between the south of Brazil and the north and Amazon for that matter. I mean, okay, that Brazil could break up, but I don't think Argentina or the other countries get involved in that. I mean, we can come up. Look in Guyana right now. The Venezuelans government, they have largest oil reserves in the world, but the province that's in Guyana that abuts to Venezuela, the current government of Venezuela is saying, yeah, but historically it's really ours and the British stole it from us and we want it back. So this kind of stuff can happen. Yeah, it's
But
true.
again, a border war, it starts with a border. And Argentina and Brazil, there's no place where they have a border, unless I'm totally wrong about
Well,
my geography.
they got a little border up around Iguazu Falls. It's called the
Ah, okay.
Triple Frontier with Paraguay, Argentina, and Brazil. And I don't know if you've been up there, but I went up there because it's it's a wild and woolly place where all kinds of strange things happen because it's a triple frontier where you cross between the three countries with no customs or anything like that. And it's called Ciudad del Este. And I went up there with Mike Battles, who used to write a newsletter for us. He's an ex CIA guy, an ex soldier, and used to run one of those mercenary companies in Iraq. He's a fun guy, and we went out because we heard that there was a Star Wars bar someplace in Ciudad del Este. It's all kind. It's a very unusual city,
Hmm.
and is there going to be a war there? And that's where these countries. No, everybody thinks it's great, as far as we could tell, where you can do stuff that you can't do in the countries, but because none of them control it, and they all kind of like it because it's a great place for black market dealings and getting stuff cheap and you know I don't know. Over the years, Argentina and Chile have border war again, you know, and maybe in the south of Chile, especially the Indians, are getting restive, which they do. They want to break off and make southern Chile Indian country. Well, it was stolen from them. I can understand that. So, yeah, this stuff can happen. We live on planet Earth, but I don't think that South America is particularly prone for anything that, listen, we'll be lucky if we don't have a civil war in the US.
I think that's coming before we see armed conflict in Uruguay, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think that's for sure. Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
Nothing will happen in Uruguay itself. Although there was a little guerrilla movement down here 40 years ago, that didn't go anywhere. And they had a military dictatorship, and the military dictatorship killed about 500 people, I guess. But this happens all over the world, everywhere, including the US. I mean, how many people have died around Hillary Clinton? I think the number is something
I
like,
saw another one today, actually. I just saw it before we got on the call, and I'm like, is this an old one? But a guy who, yeah, maybe it's an old one, but a guy who supposedly committed suicide with a shotgun. The shotgun was 20 feet away from his body.
you think these people would be more clever about doing this, but they're just bold. They're
Yeah,
just,
there you go.
nobody's going to prosecute them.
No, definitely not. Okay. Well, that's all the questions for today, Doug. I guess we can leave it there, and then we'll be back next week with more.
And I'm very happy to be back on the farm for a while.
Yeah, I'm glad you're too. I'll come over and see you next week. All right. Thanks, Doug. Take care.